Welcome to the Talkin Precision Medicine podcast, brought to you by Genialis. I'm your host, Raphael Rosengarten, CEO and co-founder of Genialis, the RNA biomarker company. On this podcast, we discuss the future of healthcare and health technology, and how advances in data and data science are fueling the next industrial revolution. If you have not already, please subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And for more information on Genialis and our unique approach to AI-driven precision medicine, please visit our website at www.genialis.com. That's www.genialis.com. Now, on to the show. Today, my guest is Joydeep Goswami, newly appointed president and CEO of the storied biotechnology company LGC. Joydeep is also a strategy advisor to Genialis. Join us as we discuss his remarkable career and lessons learned at each step of the way. I'm here today with my friend and colleague, Joydeep Goswami. Joydeep is a strategic advisor to Genialis, but bigger and better than that, recently he was named president and CEO of LGC Group. Before that, he spent many years at Illumina in the C-suite, and before that was a senior executive at Thermo Fisher. Joydeep, it's a real pleasure to have you on as our first guest of 2025.
Thanks, Raphael. Happy to be here.
So let's start with what I think everyone wants to talk about, at least for the next week or two. We managed to catch up at the beginning of JPM in San Francisco, and now we're recording this on the other side of JPM. How was your meeting? Did you enjoy it this year, and what were your key takeaways?
Yeah, look, JPM was the craziness that it always is, but the weather cooperated this year. So, I think I made a lot more meetings than in previous years. It's always a good time to connect with customers, with partners, with banks and potential investors. So there was the usual feed of that. Overall, the themes that stuck out at me was, this sort of a feeling of cautious optimism that the next year or two are going to be better for the life sciences sector, at least than the past few years have been. There's obviously some trepidation about global macroeconomic risks coming up, including inflation, including some of the, how the NIH and other agencies will be funded. And along with that, sort of how pharma and biotech will react in terms of their R&D funding. And then, sort of an overall piece around how some of the trade wars might evolve, especially related to China and what happens there, right? So those were some of the big themes, but, there was also optimism that the IPO markets will start to open up. It would get a little bit easier to do M&A with the new administration coming in the healthcare sector. So I think those were the main themes I picked up, Rafael.
Yeah, I think I also felt this sense of cautious optimism. But, I've always, as long as I've been in this industry, I've been in it from what I'll call the bottom up with building a startup. You've worked in big companies, small companies, and including very much kind of facing Wall Street in the past. What do you think is needed to go from cautious optimism to really kind of, turn the heat up a little bit and start driving more public excitement about biotech again?
I think a couple of things need to happen, right? One, uncertainty is never a friend of business. So I think once there's a little bit more clarity in terms of direction of trade policy, funding, regulatory policy, right? I think things will start looking up a little bit. I think also, some of the international conflicts that have been happening, if there's a bit of an endpoint to them, I think that should help as well. The third thing I think is really if pharma and biotech start feeling better, there's more of an investment and a long-term perspective on funding research and development. I think that'll go a long way as well, right? So those are the three things that for life sciences, the two big things are pharma biotech spend and, of course, government spend. And both of those, I think there's still a little bit of wait and watch to see what happens in the coming year and how those sectors take off. And then, of course, as M&A starts coming up, I think investor money and VC money get a little bit more free on that front, right? To see that happening.
I think that that pharma and new medicines dominate a lot of the conversation at JP Morgan, but you've worked a lot of your career also on the diagnostic side of things. And so, what is some of the diagnostics centric conversation at the meeting that maybe people miss in the top line headlines of, say, endpoints or fierce?
I would say, I mean, for me, for this particular meeting, I had less of a direct overview on that. In general, though, diagnostics, the big two things on that. One, is reimbursement going to get a little bit easier for diagnostics, especially in the sense of diagnostics that are companion diagnostics to medicines for that matter, and again, particularly oncology. The other one, which I don't think is resolved yet, right, is this whole, how's the FDA going to regulate LDTs, and are they, and if so, are the guidelines going to get clear? So there's still a bit of nervousness around that in the industry, and again, I think with the new administration coming in, there might be a opportunity to clarify that in the near future.
Yeah, I think everyone is very much waiting for some clarity, and of all of the administration's announced appointments, I think the ones that are going to oversee the healthcare sector through HHS, but then the FDA, CDC, and so forth. There's a lot. Let's just put it this way: there's a lot of mixed messages about what the priorities might be.
Yeah, and I think, look, again, as with everything, right? There's good and bad in what some of the candidates have stated. I think there's obviously a way to streamline some of the how these agencies work, and make them more innovation friendly, make them less bureaucratic. But there's nobody that I've spoken to that believes that the answer is less funding or dramatically reducing the scope and capabilities of some of these agencies, right? So I hope the incoming administration kind of chooses the middle ground, the practical path of balancing the efficiency and then the need to fund those important public agencies.
Certainly, some of the activity recently from the outgoing administration on the regulatory side has been a bevy of new guidances around things like artificial intelligence. Which is certainly timely, and given the investment from, we'll call it the Silicon Valley tech sector in the current administration, it'll be interesting to see how AI is treated at the FDA and other agencies. Does this kind of chatter, especially around AI and role of technology, reach senior executives at JPM, or is that limited more, in your opinion, to some of those of us who are kind of innovating in the space?
No, I think AI is definitely, I mean, you cannot have a conversation without AI, right? And some credit to the FDA here that they have tried to get ahead of approving AI, not necessarily generative AI, but just AI and ML in general, in terms of at least some of what they've approved in terms of bioinformatics or specifically for related to how this can be used as a physician assistant tool, for example. There's more to be done there. I think that field is moving forward very quickly. I think you're seeing AI pop up in executive discussions all over, right? In drug discovery, in terms of development and clinical trial design and things like that. Obviously, in patient care delivery, there's a lot of opportunity in terms of helping it be more effective, more efficient, more kind of in tune with sort of the latest findings and research that's being done. And you are going to continue to see it in helping diagnoses, right? So I think there then just the question is, how do you balance the speed at which these innovations are coming in with having the appropriate level of confidence. And I do agree with folks that say, over-regulation is not a good thing, right? Because it stifles innovation. And especially in this particular area, I think that would be a mistake. But I don't think I've heard anyone talk about, oh, this is just going to replace physicians or replace experts, right? They should be used as a tool. And, I think it's incumbent on companies as well to educate physicians, educate lab techs of how to work with this technology in the best possible manner. It's not just putting a product out there.
Yeah, and I think, the last people in the world who would say that AI is gonna replace physicians or frankly take anyone's job are the folks innovating the AI itself. I don't think that's the aim, right? Those who really understand it recognize that humans are really good at some things and computers are really good at some things, and those are different things. So, the idea is to use the computational technology to make the humans super, right? To give them, a lot more ability to scale.
That's exactly right. I think that's well put. And it's going to be more and more the same, right? And I do think that in time, the types of value that humans can add to particular decisions, particular patient care, is going to change. And I hope again that that is for the better, right? Because some of what has been lost because people are trying to look at spreadsheets or enter things into computers and spending time on writing up notes, etc., will be better spent in really understanding the patient, providing a oversight on AI that is much more integrative and much more kind of insightful than what it is today.
No, I think that's very well put. And so, just to recap, JP Morgan, the markets are cautiously optimistic, but of course, everyone's waiting to see what happens next. And, I guess maybe that's true in any election year where you have a change of the guard. But I think that felt right. Everyone was enjoyed being out in the sunshine. I don't know if you got any. How many umbrellas did you get as corporate swag where people showed up with a huge box of umbrellas to give out? Brilliant last year, but
None this year. Maybe I was just going to the wrong event.
yeah, I got two. I came home with two unused umbrellas. So all right. So the week ahead of JP Morgan, there were two press releases that dominated my inbox. The first one was my company, Genialis, in collaboration with Tempest, and the other was LGC announcing that you had been named as president and CEO. And so maybe we can move in that direction. Tell us a little bit about LGC. I mean, it's an old and storied and large company, but it's a little sneaky. It's not in the news all the time. So maybe for our listeners who don't know about it, maybe you can just start us off.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm not sure how many inboxes it dominated, but I'm glad it dominated yours. Well, first of all, I'm really, really excited to be taking on this opportunity to lead LGC. It's a fairly old company, but of course, it has changed through acquisitions over the last 15 to 20 years. In a nutshell, LGC is focused on three areas, right? So one would be diagnostics and genomics field where it supplies oligos and standards for diagnostics and genomics research. The second business is more standards itself and some services. So these would be standards for a wide variety of analytical standards and biological standards, et cetera, that help people kind of ensure that what they're working on is the right substance, is it the right quality, and in some cases, making sure that they do not contain things that are not supposed to be in foodstuff or in animal feed, in terms of performance enhancing drugs, etc. Right. So, and then the third business is more around DNA cell and gene therapy based CRO and CMO business, right? So broadly, it's in those areas. These are all nice, high growing markets. And the goal for LGC is to be able to serve customers to enable um, the basic research, diagnostics and therapeutics and basically safety, right? So our motto is really to help make a safer world, right? And that's kind of where our products are targeted. And again, a little bit more on the DNA, RNA side of things.
What's the footprint of the company? So where is it based and kind of, what are your markets and so forth?
So it's a global company headquartered in London, but as you would imagine, about 50% of the business or so is in North America, United States area. So again, it's a very international company and operations in many countries.
You mentioned customers and sort of you have standards or references. Are you selling products then to primarily other diagnostics companies or drug developers or all the above?
Yeah, it's more of a B2B. Customers who sell to other companies that are in the life science, pharmaceutical research and development space, as well as some food and health-based, animal health-based companies, right? So majority of the customers tend to be in that, and then there's some government and academic business as well.
I imagine this is a challenge I haven't faced. It's probably a very different challenge to come into such an established and trusted brand and, convince people to follow your lead in whatever strategic directions you're excited about, as opposed to sort of building something from the ground up. How do you see being successful at that coming in as a new CEO, new president, and building trust among your team for your vision?
Well, that's a good question. First of all, it's a company with a solid foundation, right? So I think I am very lucky and fortunate to be walking into a company that is well regarded by its customers, has really talented staff that have been there for a while. I haven't had a chance to meet everyone in the company, but I definitely have had a chance to interact and meet my leadership team and a few of the members of the leadership team beyond that. Been really impressed by their backgrounds, but also the commitment that they bring into work every day. So, my job in a nutshell is quite simple, right? Is to work with my colleagues, my team, to really make sure that we are continuing to put the company on path to steady growth. We are in the right markets, but there's always room there for the strategy to serve our customers better, to anticipate their needs, make sure we are adding to the portfolio in the right way, and then finding ways to expand our share in the markets we serve. And then there's the second part of any company is, and as you well know, right, investors are looking for profitable growth. So there's also, beyond the top line growth, there's opportunities to be expanding our gross margin and being very careful with asset allocation to make sure that we are moving down that path of getting operating leverage as we grow. So in a nutshell, that's kind of the structure there. I think as a leader, I see my role as working with my team as a thought partner and really helping to bring perspective from my background that help them kind of see see the forest through the trees, as it were, right? And to look around corners a little bit, ask the right questions so that we can collectively reach the right answers.
Pardon my ignorance on this. It's still a private company or is it public?
Yeah, it is. It is a private company and owned by investors that are based in Europe.
Okay. You'll still have investor relations work, but of a different flavor than at Illumina.
Yes. You always will have any business is going to have investor relations, and the CEO's job, as you know, is a lot of making sure that you're very aligned with your investors and are making sure that you're doing the right things to to maximize their return. In addition to building a company that's primed for long term success.
Absolutely. At JPM, I went to the NVIDIA reception, and their CEO Jensen was on stage, telling his dad jokes as he likes to do, and he had this fellow Patrick Collison on stage with him. Patrick Collison's a sort of wonderkin. I mean, he's in his 30s now, but he was the 20-something-year-old MIT dropout who, with his brother, who also dropped out of college, started Stripe, and it's like one of the most valuable private companies in the world. Anyway, Jensen was joking that the difference between the two of them is because Collison's company is private, he has a good quality of life, whereas Jensen, gets flayed in the press constantly for the I think NVIDIA is doing just fine.
Yeah, I guess I've lived some of that life in the public glare, especially when the markets were down. So yes, there I can definitely empathize a little bit with what Jensen's saying. Although I think he's in a very different league when it comes to when it comes to that.
Yeah, he can be self-deprecating and kind of people get it. Yeah. So, we'll circle back in some time. Maybe next year we can get a retrospective on your first year at LGC. But maybe we can spend a little time, Joydeep, and jump in the way back machine and hear a little about your career trajectory. Sort of how you ended up getting into life sciences in the first place, and what some of the kind of lessons along the way have been.
Yeah, it's a broad question, but I think my entry into life sciences was I would say accidental. I was after graduating from grad school, I went into consulting, and I was mostly consulting with the pharma biotech industry, and actually, strangely enough, I did a little bit of private equity work, but in the chemicals industry. The reason I joined at that point a company called Vitrogen in San Diego was I was following a leader. Greg Lucier came from GE and had just joined in Vitrogen, and he had a good vision, and I was looking for after coming out of strategic consulting, and I was looking to get operating experience in running P&Ls, and there was a meeting of the minds there. He promised to give me an opportunity to run my own business, which he did, right? And that was the start of the journey. I had about 16 years in Vitrogen, which then became Life Technologies, and finally, Thermo Fisher, where I was running P&Ls of various sizes and really exciting businesses from stem cells and regenerative medicine to proteins and cell analysis to ultimately running the NGS and clinical NGS and oncology business. And along the way, I had a chance to run our Japan business, all of Life Technologies, and then run the Asia Pacific Japan business. So really a broad variety of very enriching experiences in different kind of business dynamics, but different geographies, different products. So it was a lot of fun, actually. I'm glad I took that step. And then about 5.5 years ago, I made the switch over to Illumina more in a corporate leadership capacity as part of the C-suite, and initially as the chief strategy and corporate development officer. Really, the goal was to come and help Illumina think through the transition from just being a instruments and core consumables company to expanding more along the sequencing workflow continuum, right? So both upstream in terms of the library prep, but also in software and bioinformatics at the back end. And then of course the corp dev hat was would enable that to execute on that strategy faster. And my last 2 years at Illumina, I also picked up the CFO role, which was again somewhat of a right place, right time. I was not a traditional finance guy, much more of a business and science technical background. But I have to say, I think those 2 years of CFO really changed me as a professional. Right, had an amazing learning in terms of taking on the perspective of an investor, learning how to work with the board, learning how to actually, really focus on a few things towards driving profitable growth. And again, the CFO, Illumina is a single P&L company, so the CFO and the CEO were the only two individuals that had full view of everything that went on in the company, and I think that was very enriching. So really glad for that. So in a nutshell, like three parts to my journey: there's consulting, there's P&L, and then there's corporate experience.
One of the things I'm learning from Joydeep is his approach to tackling all new challenges with an open mind and open ears. This really speaks to me as an entrepreneur, especially as Genialis has evolved over the years to focus on one of the hardest and most intractable problems in healthcare, improving patient outcomes in oncology. While we aim to build life-changing solutions, we're only as good as the questions we ask and the humility we display in listening for the answers. Some of the most eye-opening lessons come from our collaborators. Collaborators like the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network and like Tempus, each of which view the world through their own lenses. Check out our website for descriptions of these and other partnerships we've forged around the industry to help transform medicine through data. If you enjoy this show and would like to hear more episodes with more great guests more often, there's one thing you can do to help. Subscribe. Please follow us on your favorite podcast streaming service and leave us a review or comments. Thanks, and now back to the conversation. What resonates with me is sort of the perpetual search for kind of a new challenge, right? Or at least the willingness to take on a new challenge. How do you think about? So I'm going to make an assumption here. You haven't said this, but having been through those leadership positions, you've had the opportunity to mentor and grow other executives who've come up under you. How do you think about fostering this growth mindset of taking on new and maybe unfamiliar terrain, for the sake of self-improvement, but also making an impact on organizations?
Yeah, and it's well put. I mean, look, as scientists, I mean, we are all intellectually curious, right? And I will say that I've been fortunate to meet a lot of people, scientists and non-scientists, who've shared that intellectual curiosity, and I've always seen that these are people that often are the ones that rise to challenges, are confident and in their capacity to take on these new challenges and figure out a way to succeed in them. But your point about, in any professional setting, right, it is really important to be able to have that confidence to get out of your comfort zone, as it were, right? And these are for me at least, and I as and personally, and what I've observed in other people, these are the times when you probably grow professionally and individually the most because you're challenging yourself at every point. You're forcing yourself to learn. You're forcing yourself to figure things out. And, to use sort of this Rumsfeldian verbiage a little bit, right? To me, the things that have enriched me the most are things that I didn't know, right? There are things in any new job, that what you don't some things that you're going to have to learn, but there's some things that were like, wow, I had no clue that I would be learning X, Y, and Z. And I think that has always been the most enriching in any new roles that I've taken on.
That's fascinating to me, and I want to think about this a little bit more. You can discover the things that you didn't know by happenstance, just by being around long enough, right? By kind of keeping your eyes and ears open. But are there strategies for, leveraging that scientist's curiosity to actually deliberately figure out what are the things you didn't know, right? I mean, I think it's important to kind of, constantly think, how do we shrink the world of unknowns, right? Or unknowables? And so what have been some tactics you've used or seen used to good effect in that regard?
Yeah, so I think one of the big things is just really letting yourself have these novel experiences, right? So you talked about stepping out and doing something new. That's step one, right? But then once you're in there, you have to open yourself up to doing things in a different way and listening to others, listening to their perspectives so that you can create a different framework. Otherwise, if you approach a new job saying, "Hey, I already know how to do everything, and I'm going to take what I know and I'm just going to have a cookie cutter approach to try to solve this new problem," you don't get these other learnings because you close yourself out to something new and new experiences, new ideas, new thoughts. And so that second part is equally important as the first step of doing something new in a new way. That's where you try to start to learn a lot more, and that absolutely you have to open your mind up to that change and be able to listen to others. And that doesn't mean you have to accept everything somebody else is telling you, right? But you have to first be open to receiving those new ideas.
The receptivity is crucial. I think that, at least speaking for myself, something that's an ongoing point of improvement is to get better at asking questions and maybe speak less, unless it's in the form of a question. But that's just my own personal journey.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? I think somebody made an important kind of joke, but it's so true. And listen, I have to admit, sometimes I catch myself on this one, right? Is the only time you're stopping speaking is to, it's almost like uh, waiting to reload, right? Your next kind of bullets that you're gonna fire, and that's terrible because then you're not listening to the other person, and you're not giving yourself time to breathe and to think.
Yeah. No, 100%. It's important to be self-aware in that regard. Another question I have about this remarkable journey of yours, and I've asked you how you've thought about mentoring others, but maybe you could comment a little bit on some of the mentors you've had along the way, some of the people who've taught you important things about business, about leadership, about human capital, and so forth.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring that up, right? Because I think this is a two-way street. I've really been blessed to have several mentors, both people I work with and people that have just been friends and have been incredibly kind and generous with their time and insights. So here are the big things, right? I have to say I'm kind of less good with having regular sessions with people, right? I tend to do this when I reach out and to people that I trust and people that I admire and how they have thought about life, how they've thought about their decisions, and generally before making any big decision in my life, usually it's either personal or professional decisions. I usually reach out and say, "Hey, here's how I'm thinking. What do you think about it?" Right. Um, and I've been very surprised on some of the insights that I've received from them. First, some of these mentors that I've had have had a chance to observe me and professionally and how I've behaved, etc. So I've always benefited from their counsel and guidance on, hey, here are things that you could actually change, and other things don't worry about. Right, you're doing fine, and it's great. I'll tell you the one thing that of recent that was very helpful to me. So when I left Illumina to focus on a partially on personal side to spend some more time with my kids before, especially before our younger one went off to college. Um, there was I was a little worried. I had never taken a break from a professional dimension, which was more than a weekend, right? Because I got recruited into another job and literally finish one and then move into a new one. And here it was where it was open ended. I did not have anything lined up. I knew kind of what I wanted to pursue. And I was like, oh, do I need to worry about this? What's the time frame? If I'm not doing something for 3 months, is it going to look terrible on my resume? And people are going to be wondering what the heck happened to Joydeep. And a lot of these people just said, stop, right? Enjoy this time frame, enjoy this freedom that you have, because not everybody gets this opportunity. And it's the best advice someone could have given me, right? I got the time with my family, which I'm really blessed for. I got the time to just disengage and start thinking about what really made me happy, what really I wanted from things. And, I had a list of things of this is what I'm looking for in a new role. And what it gave me as I started getting into this is this weird ability to just say no to a lot of things because they didn't fit in those criteria. And that was amazing, right? Because I had a lot of conversation. I have to say, I enjoyed learning about roles and opportunities that I didn't know about, frankly, because I was very focused on large public companies, and that's where I've spent my life. But there's a lot of interesting opportunities, interesting businesses that I got to learn about during this thing because I gave myself space and time to look at. And so I think there's things like that which are very useful coming from mentors. And then, of course, when I was looking at some of the roles before deciding on LGC, it was very useful to have their perspective on, you should consider this in a role, you should watch out for that. All of that was super, super helpful. And mentors also then open up a world of other contacts, right? They open up their networks to you, and that's also been super helpful as I've gone along.
I think those are some wonderful observations. I have two questions to sort of wrap up on, and the first one is, I'm really enamored with this concept of the things, not knowing what you don't know, and I'm going to ask you to come up with a specific example, ideally a somewhat recent one, and I was even going to put you on the spot and say something you learned through your most recent job search, but you don't have to name names. But what's an interesting example of something you didn't know that then like kind of change the way you think about things? And that's the first question. You can take a minute. And the second question is something I end with most guests, which is simply, if you are good at your job in the next 5 to 10 years, what's the world of healthcare or life sciences going to look like? Not just from your impact, but if we're all good at our jobs, how do you see the winds blowing and the trends going? What's going to be different in a decade?
That's that question is a broad one. So on the first one, right, in terms of what I didn't know. I'll pick one example, which is not so much in the recent past, but you'll understand why I'm picking this, and then I can pick a more recent example. But one of the times where I really felt this sort of understanding creep was when I moved to Japan in 2011. And just to give you some context, this was right after the tsunami and the earthquake tsunami and the subsequent kind of Fukushima blow up, right? And um, I made the decision less than a month after the incident to move to Tokyo, right, and be with the rest of the team. And it was interesting because I was the only non-native, a non-Japanese speaking person in the organization, right? Some people spoke English as well, but they were all native Japanese speakers. And so I had to do most of my work through a translator. And, you know, this was a stressful time because, the business environment had changed completely. We were trying to respond to business that obviously was going through a time of contraction. And that's never easy. We were trying to figure out, how do we thrive in this, survive and thrive, I should say, in this environment. And as you can imagine, there was a sense of urgency, but here I am as the new leader coming into this area, and it was one of those things of I could have said, "Hey, this is what I think X, Y, Z, Z, Z," and just keep going with here are my thoughts. Here's how I've done these in the past. But now you had interesting thing where I had to go, and most of my meetings with my team was through a translator. So I would say something, translator would listen, then he would translate, and they would have a discussion in Japanese, then he would translate her back. So every conversation took almost like 3 times as long. Um, and of course, as you can imagine, being the Western thinking business minded person, I was like, oh my God, this is taking so long. It's frustrating. And then I realized that I could just try to cut this short and try to anticipate what they were going to say and give them an answer to what I thought they would push back on. And then I realized that in this culture, if I ever did that, that would be the end of them suggesting or speaking their mind because they would never push back on authority as much, right? So that weird thing there, it just taught me the value of patience in dealing with my staff and the value of just listening. We talked about this a little bit more, of being open to receiving information. And it was the best thing I could have done because it allowed me to slow down, forced me to slow down, not say anything till that response came back to me. But then also I took that time to really reflect on what was different in this business environment and kind of, how did they think about their customers and how they interacted with their customers, with partners, with dealers. And it taught me the value of kind of, hey, which things do I want to push back on? Which things do I want to do differently versus accepting some of the thing on, look, they're not going to do business like the Americans or Europeans do business. Not going to happen, right? And that's not going to change overnight. And, if I keep pushing on that, I'm going to miss things.
Yeah. So, and maybe part of that is due to the necessity of having these sort of longer stretched out conversations. You weren't constantly reloading because there was time to do some listening in addition to finding your next bullet.
Yeah. It really was listening and it just that forced patience thing. Like, more recently, by the way, there's examples, of course, on the finance side, right? That understanding how investors thought about our business and what I thought they should know already, which they didn't know, and also how I viewed certain things with respect to acquisitions or how our business was doing, which they didn't understand. And I could understand why it frustrated them that X, Y, and Z was not done before in the job or how I thought about it, right? So there was a lot of learning on those things, on the metrics by which they measured success, the metrics by the time horizons they considered and how they were making their decisions for success was very, very different from what I had figured, right? So I did not know this framework that they had. And I thought that was really interesting and mind altering for me.
I love these lessons. Look in your crystal ball. We are not going to hold you to this, but you can think, interpret this question however you want it. Where is the industry headed, or what is kind of the one thing you'd be most excited to see us as life science scientists, innovators, companies, businesses get right to help people to move the needle on healthcare or the health of the world.
We started talking about AI earlier, I'm really excited to see how AI and the new generation, kind of really move the life sciences space forward, right? So let me give you two examples, right? One example is actually in our space, a little bit of I think Google and one of its I think it was DeepMind really changed how protein structure is uh, is predicted, right? And that has gone, I think, from it used to take 5 years for a PhD student to work out the protein structure of a protein, and now they've, I guess, done all of this. They have the ability to do every protein known to humans in, I don't know, something like 5 hours or some crazy number like that, right? Um, so that's one of, if I have a protein, I can predict the structure. But now you can go the other way around, right? You can take that, you can say, I need a protein that has this structural property. And how do I make that protein even if it doesn't exist in nature today? And I can then go back and figure out a way to encode for that protein in a gene and produce that protein, right? So this now creates a whole new approach with synthetic biology in the truest sense, right? Um, to combat disease, to combat hunger, etc. So I'm really excited to see where that goes and shorten the times required to get there. So that's one aspect of AI. The other aspect of AI, which um, I think there is in healthcare delivery, and a lot of times, look, doctors are also humans. There's an incredible amount of new information uh, spilling out that could be really helpful for physicians to treat patients more with the latest and greatest available there, right? And I think I'm really looking forward to seeing how AI can really support physicians in terms of giving them access to the latest information so that they can make much more informed decisions that are much more rooted in the patient rather than just being forced to make decisions on incomplete information, which they cannot possibly keep up with. Right? It's impossible to expect a doctor to read up on all the recent literature and spend time filling out forms and spend time treating a patient. So those are the two areas which I'm really looking forward to seeing those changes come through. I mean, a lot has to go right, and it's for most part, it's not technology, right? It's the things around the technology, regulations, um, risk tolerance, post-market or post-launch surveillance things, the ability to say, hey, some mistakes will happen, but you know, the greater good has to be thought about, and some of these mistakes we have to find ways to correct these mistakes as quickly as possible, right? Rather than just keep the patient from getting the benefit of these technologies for 10 years, right? Or whatever it takes.
Joydeep, those are really, really encouraging hopes, predictions, goals for the future, and I hope we see a day where all this technology meets the right human environment so that the changes you're predicting come about. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat for the podcast, and yeah, I look forward to paying attention to other press releases with big announcements from LGC going forward to see your fingerprints on things.
Well, thank you, Rafael. And listen, I know you mentioned the Genialis temp listing. I think that's hugely encouraging, right? And really looking forward to working with you as you push Genialis to new heights. So all the best on that front as well.
Thanks so much. This has been another episode of the Talking Precision Medicine podcast, brought to you by Genialis. Hopefully by now you've subscribed to the show, but if not, go ahead and click that subscribe button and leave us a review. And please do pay us a visit at www.genialis.com. That's www.genialis.com to learn more about how AI is transforming precision medicine. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.